The Antarctic winter does not arrive gently. It descends like a closing door. By May, the sun slips below the horizon and does not return for months. Temperatures plunge past -50 degrees Celsius. Winds accelerate across the ice at hurricane speed, peeling heat from exposed skin in seconds. The ocean locks itself beneath expanding sheets of frozen darkness. Almost every form of life retreats north, following light, open water, and survival. Almost. On the sea ice, far from shelter, tens of thousands of emperor penguins remain. They do not migrate. They do not hibernate. They gather, standing upright on bare ice through the coldest, darkest season on Earth, eggs balanced on their feet, backs to the wind, silence broken only by the storm. There is no food here, no warmth, no margin for error. And yet, generation after generation, they choose this moment to breed. Today, we're diving into why penguins stay behind in Antarctica's deadliest winter. Not as an act of endurance alone, but as the result of evolution, biology, and a survival strategy shaped by ice, darkness, and time. This is not a story of bravery. It is a story of biological necessity, and of life pushed to its absolute limits. The Antarctic winter is not simply colder than summer. It is a different world altogether. As the sun disappears below the horizon, the continent enters a state of prolonged night. For months, there has been no solar energy to soften the air or loosen the ice. Temperatures fall so low that exposed metal becomes brittle. Winds sweep uninterrupted across thousands of kilometers of frozen plateau, accelerating until they scour heat from anything that stands still. The sea responds by thickening, expanding outward from the continent, transforming open water into a vast, shifting plain of ice. For most animals, this change is an unmistakable signal to leave. Seabirds migrate north before the ice seals the ocean. Seals follow the retreating edge of open water, where breathing holes remain accessible. Even microorganisms reorganize, slowing their metabolism or entering dormant states beneath the ice. Movement becomes dangerous. Feeding becomes unreliable. Any species dependent on frequent access to food or shelter simply cannot remain. The Antarctic winter does not reward persistence. It punishes it. And yet, emperor penguins move in the opposite direction. As the ice thickens, they walk farther from open water, not closer. Colonies form dozens, sometimes hundreds of kilometers inland, on sea ice that is stable enough to last through winter, but close enough to fracture and melt when spring returns. This location is not chosen for comfort. It is chosen because everything else is worse. In winter, the sea ice becomes a barrier that excludes predators. Leopard seals, the penguin's most efficient hunter, are tied to open water. Orcas patrol the ice edge, but cannot reach deep into the frozen interior. By breeding far from the sea during the harshest months, emperor penguins place their eggs beyond the reach of almost all predation. The cost is extreme isolation. Once breeding begins, movement nearly stops. Adults cannot commute to the ocean for food. The ice is too thick, the distances too vast, and the energy cost too high. From this point forward, survival depends not on finding resources, but on enduring their absence. This is what makes winter so decisive. It strips the ecosystem down to a single constraint: energy. Every step, every shiver, every exposed surface matters. The cold does not just threaten to freeze tissue. It accelerates energy loss until starvation becomes inevitable. The winter landscape selects ruthlessly against inefficiency. Any species that remains must operate at the absolute minimum cost of living. Emperor penguins are not surviving despite this season. They are surviving because of it. The winter locks the sea ice into a predictable structure. It synchronizes the timing of light, temperature, and ice stability. By anchoring their life cycle to this frozen state, emperor penguins avoid the chaos of summer melt and the unpredictability of transitional seasons. The cold simplifies the environment, even as it makes it deadly. This is the paradox of Antarctic winter. It is lethal, but it is also stable. And stability, in evolution, can be more valuable than comfort. By staying behind when everything else leaves, emperor penguins commit to a season that kills movement, eliminates predators, and forces biology to operate with ruthless precision. What follows is not endurance for its own sake, but a calculated evolutionary gamble, one that begins with choosing the worst possible season because it is the only season that works. The decision to breed in winter is not a response to hardship. It is the product of deep evolutionary pressure. For emperor penguins, reproduction is tied not to warmth or abundance, but to timing. The Antarctic year is short, and the window for raising a chick is unforgivingly narrow. By the time the sun returns and the sea ice begins to break apart, a chick must already be large enough, insulated enough, and coordinated enough to survive near open water. Any delay risks exposure to melting ice, flooding, and the collapse of the breeding platform itself. Winter breeding solves this problem before it begins. By laying eggs at the start of the coldest season, emperor penguins ensure that hatching aligns precisely with the return of light and productivity. As spring arrives, phytoplankton blooms ignite the marine food web. Fish and squid become abundant, just as adults need to feed growing chicks at a high rate. What appears, from the outside, to be a suicidal choice is actually a synchronization with the Antarctic calendar at its most reliable point. This strategy did not emerge overnight. It is the result of thousands of generations shaped by failure. Any ancestor that attempted to breed later faced catastrophic losses. Eggs laid too close to summer were vulnerable to flooding as sea ice fractured. Chicks hatched too early and lacked the insulation to survive exposure. Those hatched too late missed the seasonal pulse of food entirely. Over time, only one timing consistently worked: the darkest months when the ice is thickest and most stable. Winter breeding also removes competition. Most seabirds in Antarctica breed during the austral summer, when food is plentiful and access to the sea is easy. Emperor penguins opt out of this crowded season entirely. By breeding when no other birds are present, they eliminate competition for space and minimize interference at nesting sites. There is no scramble for territory, no overlap with aggressive neighbors. The colony exists alone, governed only by wind and temperature. Predation pressure drops to near zero. In summer, eggs and chicks are vulnerable to skuas and giant petrels, aerial predators that patrol exposed colonies. In winter, these birds are absent. The darkness, cold, and distance from open water exclude them completely. The only real threat is the environment itself, a pressure that evolution can prepare for more reliably than a predator's behavior. The evolutionary gamble is stark. Survival hinges on adult endurance. Once the egg is laid, one parent must remain with it continuously, balancing it on their feet beneath a fold of skin known as the brood pouch. If the egg touches the ice, even briefly, it freezes and dies. This obligation lasts for more than 2 months, during which the incubating adult cannot feed at all. Body mass drops by nearly half. Muscle is metabolized. Fat reserves vanish. The margin between survival and collapse narrows daily. Natural selection did not soften this cost, it sharpened it. Adults who could not regulate heat precisely lost energy too fast. Those who moved too often wasted calories. Those who failed to time incubation shifts with their partner perished. Over generations, the winter breeding strategy filtered the population until only individuals capable of extreme physiological discipline remained. This is not resilience born of strength. It is resilience born of constraint. Winter breeding works because everything unnecessary has been stripped away. No movement without purpose, no energy without return, no reproduction outside a narrow lethal window that just barely allows success. By choosing the season that kills movement and demands starvation, emperor penguins secure something rare in Antarctica: predictability. And in an environment where chaos dominates, predictability is survival. Surviving the Antarctic winter is not a matter of resistance alone. It is a matter of accounting. Every emperor penguin enters the breeding season with a fixed energy budget. There will be no feeding for weeks or months, no margin for waste. From the moment the egg is laid, survival becomes an exercise in biological precision, governed by how efficiently the body can conserve heat, ration fuel, and protect vital systems. The most visible adaptation is insulation, but it is only the outer layer of a deeper system. Emperor penguin feathers form one of the densest insulating coats found in any bird, trapping layers of air that slow heat loss. Beneath the feathers lies a thick layer of fat, built during the summer feeding season and designed to be metabolized slowly. But insulation alone is not enough in temperatures that can drain heat faster than the muscle can generate it. The real innovation lies in circulation. Blood flow to the extremities, feet, flippers, and bill is tightly regulated. Specialized countercurrent heat exchange systems allow warm blood traveling from the body's core to transfer heat to cooler blood returning from exposed surfaces. This minimizes energy loss while preventing tissue from freezing. Feet, often in direct contact with ice, hover just above freezing, cold enough to reduce heat transfer, but warm enough to remain functional. Metabolism is equally controlled. During prolonged fasting, emperor penguins lower their metabolic rate to conserve energy, entering a state that borders on physiological austerity. Muscle activity is reduced. Non-essential processes slow. Fat becomes the primary fuel, releasing energy steadily rather than in spikes. Protein breakdown, which would weaken muscles needed for later movement and feeding, is delayed as long as possible. This balance is fragile. As fasting continues, the body approaches a threshold where fat reserves are nearly exhausted. Crossing it triggers rapid muscle loss and organ failure. Evolution has tuned behavior to avoid reaching this point. If a parent's energy stores fall too low before the incubation shift ends, abandonment becomes more likely, not from choice, but from physical collapse. Even breathing is optimized. In high winds, emperor penguins orient their bodies to minimize surface exposure, reducing convective heat loss. Respiratory heat exchange limits moisture loss from each breath, preserving both water and warmth in an environment where dehydration can be as lethal as cold. But perhaps the most remarkable adaptation is not structural. It is temporal. Energy use is paced to the environment. During the coldest, darkest weeks, activity is minimized almost entirely. Standing still becomes a survival strategy. Motion generates heat, but consumes energy faster than it can be replaced. Stillness, paired with insulation, becomes more efficient than movement. These physiological systems do not make emperor penguins immune to winter. They make them barely capable of enduring it. Survival is never guaranteed. In particularly harsh years, adults die on the ice, bodies frozen in place, their energy budget miscalculated by a few critical days. What looks like strength from a distance is actually vulnerability, held in check by precise biological control. The body of an emperor penguin is not built for excess. It is built for accuracy. Every feather, every blood vessel, every metabolic shift exists to answer one question: how long can life persist without fuel, warmth, or shelter? The answer is long enough, but only just. No emperor penguin survives the Antarctic winter alone. The environment is too hostile, the margin for error too small. What allows tens of thousands of individuals to endure months of darkness and starvation is not simply physiology, but coordination, a form of collective behavior that turns proximity into protection. As temperatures fall and winds intensify, emperor penguins begin to gather. The colony tightens, compressing into dense clusters known as huddles. From above, these formations appear fluid, almost organic, their edges shifting slowly as individuals reposition themselves. This movement is not chaotic. It is governed by gradients of heat and pressure that emerge from the group itself. At the center of a huddle, temperatures can rise above freezing, even while the surrounding air remains lethally cold. Penguins at the outer edge face the wind directly, absorbing the full force of the storm. Over time, these individuals rotate inward, replaced by others from the center. No single bird commands the movement. The rotation emerges automatically, driven by small shifts as individuals seek warmth and relieve pressure. This is not cooperation in the human sense. It is self-interest that scales. Each penguin responds only to local conditions: cold, crowding, wind exposure. Yet the result is a dynamic system that distributes risk across the colony. Those who fail to participate, who remain isolated or poorly positioned, lose heat faster and die sooner. Natural selection favors individuals attuned to these subtle social cues, embedding collective survival into individual behavior. Communication plays a quiet but essential role. Vocalizations allow mates and chicks to locate each other in near total darkness, among thousands of nearly identical bodies. Each call is individually distinctive, a biological solution to the problem of identity in a crowded, lightless world. When partners reunite to exchange incubation duties, timing is critical. A delayed return can mean egg loss or adult starvation. Recognition must be fast and accurate. There is also discipline in stillness. Huddling penguins do not fidget. Sudden movement disrupts insulation and exposes neighbors to wind. The colony rewards restraint. Individuals who move excessively are pushed to the margins, where energy loss accelerates. Behavioral control, the ability to remain motionless for long periods, becomes as important as physical insulation. The presence of others alters perception itself. Within a huddle, wind noise drops. Heat loss slows. The sensation of cold diminishes, allowing the body to maintain lower metabolic output. The group changes the environment just enough to keep life within survivable limits. This is not a shelter in the conventional sense, but it functions as one. Crucially, Huddling also protects the egg. The incubating parent stands for weeks with an egg balanced on its feet, unable to shift posture freely. A fall or slip can be fatal to the embryo. The density of the group stabilizes individuals, reducing the risk of sudden displacement during storms. Even here, social structure reinforces reproductive success. What emerges from this behavior is a biological strategy that no individual could execute alone. Collective warmth, shared risk, and synchronized restraint form an adaptive system greater than the sum of its parts. The emperor penguin colony is not a society with leaders or rules. It is a living mechanism, a temporary organism assembled from thousands of bodies, dissolving when conditions ease. In the darkest months, survival is not an individual achievement. It is an emergent property of togetherness. The winter strategy of emperor penguins works only when the world behaves as it always has. Their entire life cycle is calibrated to the timing, thickness, and persistence of Antarctic sea ice. Too little ice, and breeding platforms collapse before chicks are ready. Too much instability, and adults are forced to travel farther, burning energy they cannot afford to lose. The system does not bend easily. It was never designed to. In recent decades, that rigidity has become a liability. Satellite observations show that some emperor penguin colonies are now breeding on ice that forms later and breaks apart earlier than it did in the past. In several regions, chicks have been lost when sea ice disintegrated weeks before they could fledge. Unable to swim, they drowned in water they were never meant to face so early. This is not a failure of endurance. It is a mismatch of timing. Emperor penguins cannot simply shift their breeding season forward or backward. The winter strategy is locked into physiology, behavior, and evolutionary history. Eggs require a fixed incubation period. Adults require months of fasting. Chicks require the return of light and food at precisely the right moment. Change any one element and the entire sequence destabilizes. What makes this especially uncertain is that Antarctic change is uneven. Some regions show temporary increases in sea ice, while others experience a rapid decline. This patchwork makes it difficult to predict which colonies will persist and which will vanish. New breeding sites may appear, but colonization requires generations. Emperor penguins do not adapt quickly in evolutionary terms. Their strength lies in specialization, not flexibility. There are limits even to collective behavior. Huddling can buffer cold, but it cannot compensate for ice that fails beneath their feet. Social coordination can distribute risk, but it cannot replace lost habitat. When the platform itself disappears, no biological strategy remains. Scientists are still learning how close these systems are to their thresholds. Long-term monitoring has only recently become detailed enough to track colony-level success year by year. Some colonies show resilience, shifting locations slightly, or adjusting timing within narrow bounds. Others collapse abruptly. The difference often comes down to subtle local conditions: wind patterns, ocean currents, ice formation cycles, variables that remain poorly understood. This uncertainty is not a gap in effort. It is a reminder of complexity. Emperor penguins are not symbols of resilience in a simple sense. They are examples of life engineered for a specific world. When that world changes, their story becomes a test of how narrowly evolution can tune survival, and how unforgiving the margins can be. As the Antarctic winter grows less predictable, The question is no longer how penguins endure the cold. It is how much change their precision can tolerate. The ice still forms. The darkness still returns. The colonies still gather. For now. And in that fragile continuity lies one of biology's most unsettling truths. Survival is not guaranteed by strength alone, but by how well the future resembles the past.